At True Echo, we bring you real stories with real power. Stories of everyday people who make extraordinary choices, when no one is watching. Today's story starts with a single moment, a lost diamond ring, a quiet janitor, and a truth that would shake the city's elite. But what unfolded next, no one could have predicted. Stay with us. The mall was a city of glass and silence after hours. Pacific Heights Galleria, San Francisco's crown jewel of luxury shopping, held its breath under midnight's spell. The buzz of its daytime sparkle had long faded, replaced by a stillness that belonged only to the night crew. Beneath crystal chandeliers and store windows draped in designer elegance, Tasha Freeman moved quietly, mop in hand, cart trailing behind like a faithful companion. She didn't rush. She never did. Her movements were practiced, patient. Her breath steady in her chest, the only sound around her the rhythmic squeak of rubber soles on waxed marble. She had learned to disappear inside this place. Most of the time, that suited her just fine. Tasha was 43. A black woman. A mother. A worker. That's how the world tended to label her, if they bothered to notice her at all. But beneath the navy janitorial uniform stitched with her name, she carried something the mannequins and executives would never understand: quiet strength. And principles made of steel. Her sons, Malik and Tom, were the reasons she kept going. She worked nights so Malik could chase college dreams and Tom could still believe in magic. Her back ached more these days, and she couldn't afford surprises, not in life, not in paycheck. But tonight would be different. She found it by accident. It shimmered just under the sink in the VIP restroom. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a reflection. But when she crouched and picked it up, the weight told her otherwise. A ring. Diamond. Large. Impossibly large. The kind of thing that didn't belong anywhere near her mop bucket. Her pulse quickened. Her first thought wasn't, "I'm rich." It was, "Someone's going to think I stole this." She stared at it for too long. The ring gleamed in her gloved hand like it was judging her. She didn't have her glasses on, but even she could see the fine cut and platinum band. There were initials engraved on the inside, delicate and unfamiliar. The whole thing felt like a trap. Her gaze flicked to the security camera overhead. She could walk out right now. Pocket it. Nobody would know. But she would. She pulled a small ziplock from her cart and slipped the ring inside. She pressed the seal shut, then slipped it into her breast pocket, keeping her hand over it. Her eyes closed for a moment. She had made her choice. It wasn't hers. And no amount of debt, rent notices, or missed field trips would make her someone she wasn't. She finished her shift like a soldier on patrol. Every corridor felt longer. Every light flicker seemed like an interrogation lamp. When she passed the designer jewelry store on her way back to the west entrance, she slowed. There, in the window, a ring almost identical to the one now pressing against her heart. Price tag, $2.8 million. At 5:02 a.m., the night manager was filing security reports at the front kiosk. Brent. Mid-30s, always smelled like too much cologne and talked like he was allergic to kindness. "Excuse me, Mr. Brent," she said. He didn't look up right away. "Yeah. I found something during my route. In the executive restroom. You'll want to see this." She handed him the bag. He stared at it, lips parting slightly. "Is this real?" She didn't flinch. "I believe so." He turned and barked into the landline. "Get security. Now." Within minutes, 2 guards arrived. One had a crew cut and a cop's demeanor. The other kept his eyes on the screen, scrolling through footage like he was looking for proof of a crime already decided. They asked to search her things. She didn't object. Her lunch bag, her paperback, her family photo. All laid bare. They found nothing. But the tone never changed. "You understand," one of them said with the usual polite menace. "I do," she replied, though she didn't. "Not really. What was there to understand about suspicion that showed up just because you did the right thing in the wrong skin?" They logged the ring. Gave her a copy of a form. Told her she was free to go. But the chill that had entered her bones didn't leave. Not even when the sun broke over the bay. She didn't cry. Not then. But when Tom woke up asking if she brought home more peanut butter, she held him longer than usual. By mid-morning, Pacific Heights Galleria was once again a theater of opulence. Diamond bracelets sparkled under halogen lights, perfumed air shimmered as doors opened and closed, and concierge staff greeted familiar millionaires with the kind of smile money could buy. But several floors above, in a private suite of the St. Regis Hotel, someone wasn't smiling. Justice Margaret DeWitt stood motionless at the window, the city sprawling beneath her like a legal brief waiting to be annotated. The velvet-lined ring box on her table sat open and empty. Her eyes, fierce and measured, didn't betray panic, but something deeper, a throb of personal grief. That ring wasn't just expensive. It was sacred. It had belonged to Harold. Her Harold. Her late husband, who had died 5 years ago after a final surgery and one whispered goodbye. He had given it to her as a last act of faith, joking that if she could carry the U.S. Constitution in her head, she could carry his memory on her hand. She wore it everywhere, except the night before, when she removed it briefly to wash her hands in the VIP restroom before her keynote speech. And then, in the commotion of aides, reporters, and attendees, she'd left without it. Until now, she hadn't said a word. But when her aide Raina confirmed it had been found, Margaret's breath caught. "And who found it?" Margaret asked. Raina scrolled. "Custodian. Tasha Freeman. Night shift." Margaret turned from the window. "I want to meet her." "Ma'am. Today. Before noon." The mall's security office descended into chaos. Protocol binders were flipped open, neckties tightened, janitorial logs reviewed. Brent wiped sweat from his temple for the first time since he took the job. Darryl, head of mall security, issued orders like a general bracing for war. They weren't ready for a Supreme Court justice. They weren't ready for this kind of scrutiny. The ring was moved again, this time to a glass-topped pedestal inside the VIP lounge. The lights were adjusted. A fresh orchid was placed nearby. It felt absurdly theatrical, but no one dared question it. And at exactly 11:48 a.m., the doors opened. Justice DeWitt entered like silence entering a room. She moved slowly, but not weakly. Her posture spoke of years spent commanding respect in federal chambers, not shopping centers. Her silver-streaked hair was swept back in a no-nonsense bun. She wore no makeup, no smile, and yet her presence was magnetic. She examined the ring for barely a second. "This is it." Relief swept through the room like a sigh. But then, she looked up. "And the woman who found it?" Darryl cleared his throat. "She's, off shift. We didn't think you'd." "I want to meet her." He swallowed. "Right away, ma'am." Back in her small apartment across town, Tasha was unpacking groceries when the phone rang. She let it buzz twice before answering. "This is Tasha." "Miss Freeman, this is Raina Thomas. I'm calling on behalf of Justice Margaret DeWitt. She'd like to meet you." Tasha blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "The Supreme Court judge?" "Yes, ma'am. If you're available, we can have a car outside your building in 20 minutes. There was a pause. Tasha looked down at her worn jeans and scuffed sneakers. She'd never been to court for anything more than a parking ticket, and now one of the most powerful women in America wanted to see her. "Okay," she said. "I'll be ready." She didn't dress up. She didn't hide who she was. Her uniform was clean and pressed, her name tag in place, her posture calm. She carried no purse. Just herself. When she stepped out of the elevator and into the VIP lounge, the room changed. Margaret looked up. Their eyes met. For a long moment, nothing was said. "You're Miss Freeman?" Margaret asked. Tasha nodded. "You found my ring?" "I did." "You turned it in?" "Yes, ma'am. It wasn't mine." Margaret took a step closer. She dismissed everyone else with a silent wave. When the doors clicked shut behind them, the justice looked at her again, not with judgment, but curiosity. And, beneath it, respect. "You could have kept it." Tasha didn't answer right away. "I thought about what would happen if I did. What people would say. What it would teach my boys. I don't want them growing up thinking integrity depends on opportunity." There it was. The truth, laid out clean and unapologetic. Margaret nodded slowly. "You remind me," she said, her voice steady, "that justice begins with dignity." Tasha stood there, hands calmly folded in front of her, but something inside her stirred. The words Justice DeWitt had just spoken, "Justice begins with dignity," felt like a confirmation she hadn't known she needed. She hadn't asked to be seen. She certainly hadn't expected to be honored. But for the first time in years, someone didn't just see her as the help. She saw her as a person. "People like us don't often find ourselves in rooms like this," Margaret said, gesturing to the sleek lounge around them. "No, ma'am," Tasha replied. "We usually just clean them." Margaret's face didn't flinch at the bluntness. Instead, she studied Tasha with a kind of reverence, one shaped by years in courtrooms where the truth was rarely handed over without a fight. "Why didn't you give the ring to your direct supervisor?" she asked. Tasha's eyes sharpened slightly. "Because I've lived long enough to know how easy it is for things to disappear when the wrong person handles them. If I had left it with Brent, well, I can't be sure the ring would have ever reached you. And if it didn't, they would have said I took it. Or sold it." Margaret gave a faint, solemn nod. "That's not paranoia. That's survival." For a moment, the two women simply existed in silence. Not because they didn't have more to say, but because there was too much between them already understood. "My husband used to say," Margaret said quietly, "that the most dangerous thing in America is a poor person with principles. Because they scare people who think power should only come from money or title." "He sounds like someone I would have liked," Tasha replied. "He was. He believed in handwritten thank you notes and in returning every phone call. And he believed that when someone gives something precious back, you don't just say thank you, you make sure the world remembers it." She walked to the glass display and looked at the ring once more. Then turned back to Tasha. "I can't undo the way they treated you last night. I can't erase how many times you've been overlooked. But I can make sure this moment stands." Margaret reached out her hand, not with pomp, not with obligation, but with sincerity. Tasha hesitated, then took it. The handshake didn't feel symbolic. It felt like truth. When the doors reopened, the mall administrators and security staff jumped to attention. The air, once thick with apprehension, had now shifted towards something else entirely, urgency. Margaret turned to Darryl. "I want a formal commendation filed for Miss Freeman. I want it to go to the mayor's office. I want it public." "Of course, Your Honor," Darryl stammered. "I want it on the record," Margaret continued, "that the woman who returned a multi-million-dollar ring did so not because of policy, but because of character." She turned slowly to the rest of the assembled staff, eyes sweeping across their stunned faces. "And someone should ask her if she needs anything. Not because you owe her. But because she didn't ask." The silence that followed wasn't shameful, it was awakening. Tasha stood quietly beside Margaret, but the room now revolved around her. She didn't cry. She didn't shrink. She stood tall. Because this moment, was hers. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind San Francisco's skyline, a quiet ripple of media whispers began circulating. A Supreme Court justice had made an unscheduled appearance at a shopping mall. No legal emergency. No scandal. Just gratitude. But the story didn't stay quiet for long. By the next morning, local news stations had caught wind of it. Janitor finds $3 million ring, returns it, owner is U.S. Supreme Court Justice, the headlines blared. Photos surfaced of Tasha shaking hands with Margaret. Blogs praised her integrity. Editorials debated the surveillance footage. Social media exploded, debating whether people like Tasha were heroes or just doing what's expected. Tasha didn't post about it. She didn't even have a Twitter account. She went home, fed her sons, and ironed her uniform for the next shift. Because for her, integrity wasn't a moment. It was a lifestyle. City Hall was packed. Not with politicians, or lobbyists, or even protesters, but with cameras, community members, students, and staff who had taken an early lunch just to witness something rare. Something real. Tasha Freeman stood at the podium in her janitor's uniform, pressed, neat, and unmistakably hers. The mayor had insisted she could borrow something formal if she wanted. But Tasha had declined with a quiet firmness. "This is who I am," she'd said. "You can honor me, but don't dress me up to do it." Flanked by city council members and the mayor himself, she stood still while a golden plaque was presented to her, engraved with the words, "In recognition of unshakable integrity and exemplary civic duty." The crowd applauded. Some stood. Most were still processing that the woman being honored wasn't a CEO, a politician, or a tech billionaire, but someone they had likely passed in a hallway without noticing. And that was the point. She wasn't supposed to be noticed. She wasn't supposed to be here. But here she was. Because she chose to do the right thing when it counted. The mayor, to his credit, didn't fumble through a shallow speech. He kept it brief. Sometimes the most important voices in our city don't come from behind desks or on stages. They come from the night shift. They come from those who keep this city clean, functional, and honorable. Miss Freeman didn't just find a ring. She found a moment to define what kind of city we want to be. Behind her stood Raina, the aide who had first called her. In her hand was a thick folder, containing a certificate, the formal commendation, and a sealed envelope with the Supreme Court's letterhead embossed in silver. Tasha turned to accept it all with both hands. No tears. No smiles. Just something quiet and solid rising in her chest, pride. Back at the mall, things had changed too. The mop bucket was the same. So were the mirrors and the heavy glass doors. But people noticed her now. Brent, the night manager, started leaving a fresh cup of coffee by her cart at the start of her shift. He never said it was from him, but she knew. Daryl, the head of security who had barely met her eyes before, now greeted her with a nod that wasn't forced. And when a group of newly hired custodians were introduced to the team 2 weeks later, their supervisor ended the rundown with, "And if you want to learn how things are really done around here, ask Miss Freeman. No ceremony. Just truth." 3 days after the City Hall ceremony, Tasha found an envelope in her locker. No postage. No return name. Inside was a handwritten letter. Neat, elegant handwriting. Ink that hadn't been rushed. Miss Freeman. I've spent my life surrounded by law books, case precedent, and marble courtrooms. But what you reminded me, and reminded this country, is that justice is not a theory. It's a choice, often made by people no one sees, in moments no one records. You didn't ask for thanks. But you deserve it. You didn't ask to be remembered. But I will not forget your name. With utmost respect. Margaret DeWitt. Associate Justice. United States Supreme Court. Tasha sat on the breakroom bench and read it 3 times. Then she folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it between the pages of her dog-eared paperback, the one she read during breaks, while the city slept and the floors gleamed. Malik came home late that night, earbuds still in, his face weary from SAT prep. He dropped his bag at the kitchen counter and reached for cereal, same as always, but paused when he saw the envelope sitting next to the sink. Tasha was at the table, folding laundry. She looked up, watching his reaction. "What's this?" he asked, picking it up. "A letter," she said, voice calm. "From a Supreme Court justice." Malik blinked, once. "You serious?" "As serious as the Constitution." He opened it carefully, reading each line like it was scripture. When he was done, he looked at her for a long time. Not with shock. Not with pride. But with something deeper, understanding. "You didn't even tell me all of it," he said quietly. Tasha folded a towel. "Some stories feel more true when you live them, not tell them." Malik nodded. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm going to frame this. Not for the name at the bottom. But because it has yours at the top." And just like that, Tasha felt something lift. The invisible weight she'd been carrying since the moment she first saw the ring. Not guilt, but the burden of being unseen. Untrusted. She had carried it like armor. But here, in her son's eyes, she saw herself, unshielded and whole. A week later, during a televised panel on ethics in public service, Justice DeWitt sat across from lawmakers, professors, and retired military officials. The topic was restoring public trust in American institutions. Midway through the discussion, she leaned forward, her voice resonant but unhurried. "We often talk about restoring trust," she said. "But trust isn't restored by grand gestures. It's rebuilt in the small, unseen acts of people who don't seek praise, just principle." The moderator raised an eyebrow. "Are you referring to any recent experience in particular?" Margaret smiled, faint but unflinching. "Yes. A woman named Tasha Freeman. A janitor. Who found a diamond ring worth millions, mine, and chose to return it quietly, knowing full well how she'd be judged. She didn't do it for reward. She did it because her character didn't give her any other option." The room went quiet. "She didn't just return something valuable," Margaret continued. "She reminded us all that justice isn't what happens in the courts, it's what happens in moments no one applauds. That's where the foundation of trust is laid. In silence. In sacrifice." The moderator turned to the audience, who were now leaning in. And for once, the applause that followed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Tasha didn't watch the broadcast live. She was mopping the Lower East corridor of the Galleria, same as always. The news would find her later, through whispers in the break room and a buzz of texts from coworkers and neighbors. But she didn't react. She didn't need to. Because she already knew who she was. 3 months passed. The mall, like time, moved forward in routine elegance, seasonal window displays, weekend crowds, the predictable rhythm of wealth on parade. But for Tasha Freeman, the world no longer moved quite the same. Not because she had changed her job. Not because her mop felt any lighter. But because something within her had solidified. She had her name back. Not the one stitched on her uniform, but the one that now echoed in rooms she'd never stepped into. In classrooms, in city council meetings, in whispered conversations about ethics and integrity. One afternoon, as she was polishing the mirrored elevator panel in the West Atrium, a woman in a tailored pantsuit paused near her cart. "You're Miss Freeman, aren't you?" the woman asked. Tasha nodded, cautious. "My daughter's school had a whole discussion about you. About what you did. She came home and said, 'Mom, we don't need capes to be heroes.'" Tasha smiled, just a little. "Your daughter sounds like she's already got it figured out." She didn't linger on compliments. She finished her shift. Later that night, back home, Tom curled up beside her on the couch as she read her worn paperback. He was reading too, his legs flopped across her lap, his little hand resting near the edge of the Supreme Court envelope now framed and hanging on their wall. "Mom," he said suddenly. "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Tasha looked down at him. "A janitor?" "No," he said firmly. "Honest." That night, she didn't need sleep to rest. She had peace. 2 weeks later, an invitation arrived. It was embossed. Heavy. Government issued. Tasha Freeman was requested to attend a private reception in Washington, D.C., hosted by Justice DeWitt and a coalition of civic leaders honoring unsung American heroes. All expenses paid. No speech required. Malik begged her to go. Tom offered to pack her suitcase. She'd never been on a plane before. But she went. Not for the recognition. Not even for the justice. She went because she wanted to walk into a room where dignity wasn't assumed to wear a suit. At the reception, Margaret greeted her with a familiar smile and pulled her into a quiet corner. "I wasn't kidding," she said. "They still talk about you in my chambers. A few interns have your story pinned to their corkboards." Tasha chuckled. "That's strange." "No," Margaret said, "it's necessary. They need to know what real integrity looks like before law turns it into theory." They clinked glasses, Tasha with sparkling water, Margaret with white wine. No cameras. No press. Just two women who had fought to be seen in different ways, finally seeing each other. And in that moment, history bowed not to power, but to principle. Sometimes, the loudest truths are spoken in silence. And sometimes, a diamond ring doesn't shine nearly as brightly as the character of the one who returns it. Tasha Freeman didn't just clean marble floors, she reminded a nation that justice begins long before the gavel falls. It begins in quiet courage. At True Echo, we bring you stories that remind us who we really are. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share it with someone who still believes in doing what's right when no one's watching. And as Justice DeWitt once said, justice doesn't always come from the courtroom. Sometimes, it walks a mop down a marble hallway, and it shines.